Raising the Conversation, a podcast by the MacRae Centre for Faith and Culture at Acadia Divinity College, with your host Joel Murphy, facilitator of trend research and analysis here at the MacRae Centre.
Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I'm very excited to be able to be joined by Dean Brenton, who has served as the President of Impactus since 2021. He has over 26 years of pastoral and denominational leadership. He has contributed nationally, provincially, and at the within parachurch organizations, as well as a global and local missionary. He holds a Master of Theological Studies and is pursuing a doctor of ministry here at Acadia Divinity College, and while the Office of Impactus are located in Ontario, lives here in the Valley with his wife, Kelly. And so I'm really grateful that he's able to be part of the conversation and be able to join us today. Thanks for being here, Dean.
Hey, you're most welcome. I'm looking forward to chatting today.
Yeah. So this, as you know, we were just chatting, like this series that we're working on this time around within this podcast is looking at kind of the value of futures thinking for Christian leaders. And so I know we've had lots of conversations about this, but why do you think it is important for Christian leaders today to pay attention to the future? And how has that shaped your own leadership and imagination is kind of our first big starting question. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Leadership, I think, by nature is future thinking. It's always about guiding, leading, creating, taking a church or congregation or a ministry to somewhere. And so there's always that "where are we going" kind of question that is a part of that conversation. So I think even like things like goal setting, strategic planning are always future oriented. And I think we've learned very vividly, through COVID and all those things, that it's hard to anticipate the future, but it's still important to do so. And so whether it's, tracking with ministry trends or new technology or cultural changes and implications, those things just help us to be more effective and prepared to minister, I think, effectively in the places that God has placed us. But I also think futures thinking, I think, is important for leaders as well, Christian leaders in particular, because instead of just reacting to what's coming at us, which is sometimes difficult because there's so much comes at us sometimes, but it's also thinking about how can we create a new future? How can we be proactive to get ahead of some of the trends, and how can we create a flourishing culture, community of faith that actually builds a new future for us instead of just trying to respond to everything that's coming our way. So I think that's always kind of shaped some of my thinking. No doubt it's evolved over time, but I always had a little bit of a sci-fi fan, boldly go where no man's gone before kind of thing. And so, but just, thinking about the future. So there was always that little wiring in me, but also a lot of the roles I've served in were whether pastoral or denominational or currently, I've always been thinking about new innovations and new programs, new events, and how can we be more effective. So I think it's been a growing area of interest, but also a growing value for me, I think. And I think the Futuring Hub and the conversations we've had have been really helpful to help clarify that and that actually give me some tools to be more effective in that as well.
The idea of science fiction is such a lovely, right? It's a natural in the futuring space. There's so much around that, and often we think about the future, think flying cars, whatever it might be. But I think what I hear and what you're saying is the way that it can help inform and ground how we think about, and as we think about innovation or leadership as a whole, are there and then thinking again specifically from a Christian worldview, like are there like scriptures or theological perspectives that, as you have engaged with futures thinking or thinking about leadership, like that have helped ground that as you engage in that kind of foresight perspective?
Yeah, I'm actually New Year starting new Bible reading plans and things. But I'm just reading through Genesis, and I'm amazed at God's big picture story. Right, it's always moving to something, Abraham gets called to go to a new land. Moses, called to lead the people to the promised land. There's always this movement in God's big story. And I've been struck by it just as I'm rereading Genesis again. But a couple things that I think stand out. One is a little obscure reference in First Chronicles. It's the men of Issachar, who were noted for being able to understand, discern, and were advisors to King David. And that little unique reference in that list of other men who supported David and other leaders who supported David, just it's always intrigued me. Like, to have that kind of wisdom around you in leadership, I think is really great. And I think David obviously found that to be the case. And it's so much so it gets tucked into that little passage as like a noteworthy thing that these men of Issachar were known for this reality. So what would that look like if we were known for that? And I think my other orientation is probably around my background, come from a Pentecostal background. And so eschatology was always a big part of our thinking. And some of it was very much, end times and thief in the night kind of stuff. But it also gave me a real appreciation for the now but not yet kind of, and the kingdom to come. And so it grounded me in an appreciation for what the future could look like and God's preferred future and the future hope that we have in him. So I think all of those things, and even recently, just doing the Demon program in particular, a lot of work around the faith formation kind of space. And just we've had some conversations around this, that discipleship or faith formation is actually future oriented, is very much like we are to become in Christ, that we are to be conformed to the image of Christ. He's making us, molding us into his image. So there's a future reality in that. And so those kinds of things that, it's anchored in God's character. There's examples in scripture. And then there's that eschatological kind of perspective that can also orient us to look to the future with not despair or confusion, but hope.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, it's almost like that telos like perspective in terms of now but not yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so much. Yeah. So I love
So much.
So much. Well, I think it's just it frames the experience of thinking of the value of it. And it doesn't, I think the challenge for a lot of Christian leaders is when we think about futures thinking, or when you think about planning for the future, can be a hesitancy around, okay, well, we're just going to forget the past. Like, we're going to forget, we're not going to trust God. We're not going to, right? Is this kind of there's a tension, or the experience is, okay, great, let's forget everything and just do everything completely new. And then you lose, the values of tradition and the history of the church as a writ large. And so I think that's a really helpful framing of like the men of having growing in wisdom, right? Like it's a prophetic act. It's an intentional way of growing an understanding of where we are, as well as growing an understanding of possible futures. I think that's really insightful. Yeah.
Yeah. And in ministry, like sometimes those of us that are wired to think about the future and innovation, we can quickly jettison the past and alienate people that we serve, when sometimes I think we miss the reality that, it's Jesus Christ the same yesterday, today, and forever. So anchoring in the past actually informs us for the future and prepares us for the future. But we need all those things in perspective, right? We need that God's been faithful in the past, he's faithful in the present, but he'll also lead us to a new preferred future. So that's been a lesson that I've had to learn as well, because I want to drive ahead. Like, I want to keep doing new things. So.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So could you, talking about doing new things or driving ahead or looking forward, could you share about a practice or an experience where that process of engaging in the future has helped you or your community see something new or take a meaningful step forward? Again, not in the kind of Andrew Root critiques innovation for, right, as a perfect, it's just innovating for the innovation's sake and it's lacking discernment and theological reflection, but in a way that as you thought about moving forward and you engage in these practices, that it was actually quite meaningful and constructive. Or I guess the opposite of that would be you tried and it didn't work, but still the process was positive.
Yeah, yeah. Well, a very real example. So just a few months back, did a course on innovating church, uh, which you were a part of for at least a day. And that was really helpful, actually. You introduced us to Three Horizons thinking and the process around that. And so it really intrigued me. And so I did some more reflection on it. And actually, in the ministry I serve in, we were going through a governance change. And we had to it was a significant change for the ministry and in the style of leadership and the governance structure we had. And so we wanted to bring our stakeholders along to help them appreciate, but also be willing to explore this new governance model. And so I actually took the Three Horizons framework and introduced it and did some activities over the summer, did focus groups with them, walked them through that. And it just generated a lot of really healthy conversation on both where we've been, some of the challenges we're facing, and what the preferred future could look like.
Mhm.
And I mean, fast forward, there's lots of detail that went into all that. And then we had our AGM in September. But the good news story with it, that framework actually helped us get to that decision. And a lot of great comments came from those sessions. And our governance change actually happened. And so it was well embraced with very little, I'd say, even challenge or problems. And so that was just one example of many that you introduced us to, but I did find that future thinking model of Three Horizons was just really helpful for what we needed. And it was like a gift that you gave us, for me in particular, at that time. And so we received the gift, we used the gift, and it worked. So yeah, thank you to you for that.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. That's awesome. And that's Bill Sharp's Three Horizons. I love that. Like, and I think that's the reason why, and I'm sure like it's encouraging to hear that it worked, but like even the framing of that, it kind of goes back to our conversation previously about, right? About recognizing you need the past and understanding the present to grow in wisdom to be able to
Yeah,
perceive that future. And like this
right.
idea of that within the framework is that we come into the conversation with different perspectives and values towards the future, and that is actually then informs how we engage, and that recognizing that and valuing all those voices, like we need the hopeful, optimistic, visionary leader who can see the thing, but we also need the person who's like asking the question, well, like, how are we going to pay for that? Which is often a real life thing for in many
Yeah.
ministry contexts. So that's
I've
awesome.
reflected since a few times, like I wish I had that tool a few years ago, right? And in some of the things that we were trying to introduce, that would have been very helpful to bring those people who need to ask the hard questions, along with the dreamers who are ready to jump into a new future, and bring them together, because something really special happens that really is a solid kind of, I guess, approach or framework that you can build off of that is, yeah, just serves well. And it really worked for us in this moment. And so
Mm.
it was, I love that idea of futures thing. And I've actually pulled that into my thinking around the DMin program I'm in and the project or thesis, and where that will go. It will have a futures thinking component of what faith formation will look like in the future.
Oh, I love it. And obviously, like I'm biased towards the approach and the value of it, but I think increasingly we're seeing it in the need for it, particularly in this moment where things are so uncertain, but also there's things rebuilding and we're reconstructing, it's yeah. The final question I want to kind of conclude our time because I feel like we could talk forever actually. But within your role, you get to work with leaders across Canada, within your role within Impactus as the president. Um, when you think about the future, and you mentioned the word hope, like what gives you hope? And then what encouragement would you offer to leaders who might feel uncertain about what lies ahead or uncertain about even engaging in this type of approach to thinking about what could be?
Yeah, what gives me hope? It's a great question because there is so much uncertainty, and it seems like every day there's a new news cycle of some new crisis somewhere, right? It's like a sensory overload all the time.
Mm.
And I think it's easy to lose hope in these moments. What anchors me in it, and I've had to remind myself, through the experience of COVID and changes and transitions in our ministry and in my own life, and it was anchoring myself in that larger scriptural narrative that God is unchanging. Like he's got a story and a plan, and he is leading us to that preferred future. So one of the theme verses we're using this year in our events is out of Hebrews. It says we're receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken. And I love that language, that we can live unshakable lives because of we serve an unshakable God who has gifted us, has graced us with an unshakable kingdom, and constantly counteracting the voices of negativity or challenge or confusion, disconnection in the world with those kinds of scriptural theological realities have been very important for me.
Mm.
I'm also seeing signs of life, like in spiritual formation. I think this cultural moment has also created a spiritual hunger and urgency and openness. And in many ways, I feel like the church and Christian leaders have been set up for this moment. We have a hope-filled message. And if we approach the future right with being humble, gracious, loving, and hope-filled, like I think we have the antidote to everything that's going on around us, right? And I think we're set up for this moment if we don't slip into the cultural moment and let it inform us more than a theological scriptural perspective.
Mm.
So I've got lots of hope. I know there's lots of challenges that come at us. Just yesterday, we were in a full team staff meeting, and we were talking about just some of the ways that God had led us over the past 12 months, and how he had prepared us even before things like tariffs had arrived on the scene, and provided for us so that even when that happened, we were still in a good, stable place. And I think there's reminding ourselves of, we do serve a faithful God. He is always faithful. Even when we are faithless, he is always faithful because he cannot disown himself, the scriptures say. And I love that. And it's a reminder for me. So it's just constantly, reminding myself of who God is and his great plan. And I think there's lots of hope for a world that's looking for it right now.
Oh, that's great. I think that's a wonderful spot to land and conclude our conversation, and just with the emphasis that the God story is still unfolding, and we are part of that, and we are called to be a part of that, and that there's hope in that. And I really appreciate your taking your time today, Dean, your energy and your enthusiasm around this, and you're humble in the work that you do, but really appreciate like the offerings that you have. And I think there's some really good takeaways for folks listening, and for myself to continue to chew on what we spoke about today. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the work you're doing, because it is really helpful and informative. And anybody who's listening to this, like, check out the work of the Futuring Hubs, because it is, it's very, I think it's a blessing and an opportunity for us to be sharper in the ministries we lead.
Oh, I appreciate that. Great shout out. All right. Thanks, Dean.
You're welcome.